Hello friends and welcome. Today we're going to cover some common mistakes and missed opportunities when it comes to warding. It's a bit of an expansion to the warding guide I made before. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. Today we're starting with a Shadow Demon, Divine. It doesn't really matter on the position 4 or 5. Just whenever you have a warding opportunity, both supports have to do this. So his team makes a rotation up here, they find some kills, and they're going to start pressuring this tower. As a support player, as soon as you win these kind of fights, you should immediately think, do I have an observer to go place? Because one of the mistakes support players tend to make is like, I know I need to ward, but they just do it at any moment and then they feed a lot. You need to find good opportunities to place different types of observers. When you're placing defensive observers, the whole enemy team can be alive. It's kind of whatever because you're on your own half of the map. You're doing it safely. But when we want aggressive vision, which we do in this game, there's a Medusa and an Arc Warden. They're going to be heavy farmers. We have the more aggressive lineup. We want to be able to find them. Where are they going to be if not in the lane? They're going to be somewhere in this jungle, somewhere over here, somewhere over here. It's like those three main jungle spots that they're going to be farming. And if we want to make a smoke play with the Void Spirit or the Beastmaster, we want to see that ahead of time. So once you win a fight up here, hey, these two heroes are dead. If you watch the minimap during that, Arc Warden, the real one, is mid. Mirana's bottom. Nyx was down here, got kind of low. So no one else is up here. It's very safe as a support to come place a deep ward. Now, where would we place it? Going back to those jungle spots I mentioned, I want to see them there. So somewhere over here, maybe up here. All of these would allow you to see anyone farming in this upper part of the map. For this jungle, maybe somewhere back here is pretty sneaky. Maybe somewhere like along this ledge could work. This spot can work, but it's kind of shallow, right? You can kind of place this whenever. I'd prefer something deeper. This cliff spot, although I'm usually hesitant with cliffs, right? This cliff spot's kind of deep, and the enemy may not suspect that you have something here, especially because this tower is still up. So like that's kind of cool. Otherwise, like back here could work. Any of these deep spots, just you don't want them to find it. You want to like catch the enemies in these areas and know that they're farming there so that you can smoke over and kill them. So after this kill, that's what Shadow Demon should do. He doesn't really need to help pressure this tower because there's not really anyone alive. Once he finds this, all the better, because you don't want to be spotted placing these deep wards, and the fact that he just found an observer right here really tells me like there should not be any more vision up here, because it's very unlikely that there's an observer here and here and here and here or here, unless you're in like Guardian or Herald. Then actually I see it quite often. But beyond that, people learn to spread out their vision. So when you happen to find an observer like right here, I'm very, very confident that I can move safely into the enemy half of the map without being spotted and without the risk of running into an enemy hero because they are dead. So this should be a deep ward right now. Shadow Demon is actually going to place one up here, and this is like okay as a generic spot. Think of this area as a cliff, so it's like it might get found out. It's not like bad in general, but think about this unique game. I want to be making more aggressive plays. This tower is hopefully falling soon. That means the map is moving in further. This is going to be a relatively shallow ward that doesn't really help me find the Medusa or Arc Warden farming in any of those spots we just talked about. The map is bigger than it has ever been, so it's not possible to cover everything. You could just have to like infer and hedge your bets based on the information you gather. So Shadow Demon here makes a smoke, comes up here, places this observer. I don't love this. One, the tier 2 is already down, the tier 1 mid is down, so this is a relatively shallow observer, considering that we want to be making more aggressive plays. Plus, he did smoke the Beastmaster, trying to get like a team play going. I know that's not always going to happen, but when it does happen, that means we're hoping to like go in further with some of these observers we already have, the Hawk, find a pick off, get a kill, and then we have control of the area. We'd love to do de-warding and then place a deep ward now that we've like made it in further. We've gone ahead and put our observer out here, which is pretty shallow, that you can place like whenever, and that means if this smoke does succeed, we no longer have any observers to place. So when you make this kind of smoke, you get the team to go. Don't just like drop all your observers way too early. There's more situations where sometimes you do, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Now off of this smoke, this Hawk spots the Arc Warden. This is why it's so important to have deep wards so that you can find clear targets like this. That's the guy I want to kill. Let's go smoke towards him. Let's go get that kill, and then let's place our wards. Arc Warden walks up here and dies. This is giving a lot of information to us. It's not just an Arc Warden kill. Why would he have ever walked here if he had an observer on this cliff? He would have seen the Beastmaster, right? The smoke broke. He continued to walk this way because he can't see up here. If he could have, he's awful. He's terrible. Why would you ever do that, right? So we can go ahead and guess that there's no observers anywhere in this area, and depending on your bracket, you can also infer there's no observers in this area. Otherwise, they would have spotted the smoke, and if you know the enemy team has smoked, they can only go like over here or over here, right? That's the most likely. So Arc Warden would just, again, have to be very bad to decide like, yeah, I'm going to farm towards where I think they just smoked. The lower you are, maybe they just didn't see the smoke, right? And they just made a mistake, so maybe you don't want to infer that. But that's where you adjust for your bracket. This is divine. You should assume that your opponents are relatively good. If there was an observer here, they would have seen a smoke. They would have been more cautious. If they had an observer here, he would not have continued to walk up here. You don't need to spend your sentry here. You can save it for somewhere else on the map. Here is one of the most common ways to lose the game for your team if you're a support player. Shadow Demon has placed a cliff ward because his team is in the area. This is really good. You want to defend this ward so that anyone who walks up gets killed, and you get to keep this ward that is in a very common spot on this cliff. And it's good because they're pushing this tier 2, and then they might push the high ground because there's nothing really left to do besides that. So this part is good from Shadow Demon, and he's even pinging it. You don't want to be the enemy supports coming up. Many supports feel this need, right? Oh, they're coming up. We better place like defensive vision. We better deward this cliff. But if you know the enemy team is in the area, you just have to assume that these wards exist. And these wards spot all the way out here, which means you already see the enemy supports coming in, even though they're putting a relatively conservative one. They're not trying to put it on this cliff or anything, right? It's still far enough that they're going to get caught and they're going to be killed like this. And that means now there is a numbers disadvantage so that the Radiant team can now push up while the Nyx is dead. And, you know, sometimes it's later in the game, so the death timers are much longer. This happens all the time over here. I'm sure you've experienced it, right? You're like, oh, I gotta come deward this. Let me walk up. And like, oh, I'm dead, you know? Or you're the team who's placed this. Your whole team walks away, and you watch a support walk up here on their own and deward this. And you're like, well, that was a waste of a deward and a waste of an opportunity. That could have been the end of the game right there. So whichever side you're on, defensive or offensive, these are critical moments. Make sure you're playing them out correctly, or you might just lose the game. It's good to want to place a deep ward, but you still need to make sure that you can do so safely. So here, Archon, Legend Game, Crystal Maiden wants to place a deep ward, which is great, but keep an eye on the minimap here. We only just saw Death Prophet show herself down here, and in the middle, there's a Witch Doctor. There's still 3 heroes missing, and there's no existing deep vision to really help us. Maybe if we had one here, we could see that the other 3 heroes are in this area, or at least 2 of them, and the last one we're not that scared of. But I'm kind of having a rough game on this Crystal Maiden here. I've died a couple times. I'm kind of scared of everyone. So the fact that we don't know where they are makes it pretty dangerous to walk in here. And maybe you succeed and you place a deep ward, or maybe you die and then you don't get anything done and you fed away another death. This is very common for support players who feel like, oh, I got a ward, it's my job. But you have to make sure you can do your job safely. You got to follow the health and safety regulations, right? And currently, we don't see any enemy heroes. So Crystal Maiden walks in here, does her like trying to deward, Legion Commander. So got very lucky. We didn't just run into Legion. If you didn't know, this is the vision from Crystal Nova giving vision of LC. So nighttime vision, LC does not actually see Crystal Maiden right now. That's very lucky for Crystal Maiden. What does that tell Crystal Maiden? There ain't no vision in this area for the enemy team. Otherwise, this Legion would be looking for another free duel kill off this blink. She'd immediately be like, oh, Crystal Maiden's heading in. I'm heading to Crystal Maiden. Hey, there's a Crystal Maiden right here. I'm just going to blank duel, get a free kill. This means we got very lucky on Crystal Maiden. We are gathering information, but we probably still shouldn't have done it at this time. But I want you to see all these things that are available to you in this game, which means I don't feel the need to check anywhere over here either, because that should have let Legion know that I was in the area, because Crystal Maiden just kind of like came in this way, right? Here's a relatively good example of a deep ward. The team kills this Legion commander. Look how many of us are here, literally all 5 of the team. I feel very safe doing whatever I want here as a support. Crystal Maiden is going to come up and place a deep ward over here. The location is fine. Maybe you want to check this cliff just to be safe. You wouldn't want them to know this is here. However, your team has been playing here for the last couple minutes, and LC still did just, do this. So I would actually infer, maybe there's nothing here. But depending how many wards you have up, especially, let's say that's your last observer, they've dewarded some other ones, and you have some sentries on you. I really need this thing to survive, so I would err on the side of safety and check this cliff. Of course, not on the cliff. I'm Crystal Maiden. We're going to put our sentry like on the low ground somewhere, and then Q on top of the cliff. But in this case, we actually have 2 observers still alive on the map. We have 2 more in our inventory, so there's some time we weren't warding. But that's okay. We'll use it to our advantage now. I'm kind of willing to take the risk on this observer. Based on the information over the last couple minutes. I don't think they should have done this if they had vision around here, but also if this gets dewarded, my team is not playing totally in the dark, so I'm kind of up for it. Having said that, this is also the only deep ward your team will have. These are very defensive ones, so if this one is killed, it will make it hard to come place more deep wards. So in that sense, maybe I do care about it a little bit more, even though I have other observers, so maybe I will go ahead and put a sentry and check this cliff. If you keep your eye on the minimap, you can also get information of where the enemy has observers. So for example, down here, I see this clockwork coming in towards ours. Now, if you click him, you can see that he has an observer and a sentry. Maybe you're too slow to do that. Maybe you only watch him and you don't even click on him. Based on how he's moving though, you might still be able to tell. It doesn't really look like he ever placed a sentry. He just rocket flares on top of the cliff and then immediately starts killing it. If you do click him, you get that information that, hey, he never placed a sentry. If you're just watching, it doesn't really look like he ever placed a sentry, but he already clearly has true vision in this area. You don't see a sentry though, because you have one here, so it's not something on the cliff. It's not something on this side. There's probably a sentry somewhere over here that our sentry doesn't catch. So later when I come down here, I don't really want to put, like if I want another defensive observer, maybe you don't, but if you do, I'm not really going to put it on this cliff again, and I'm not going to put it over here because that's where I think a sentry is. Yo, what the fuck? This fight, the team goes in, they do pick up this Naga kill, and a whole team fight breaks out. As it starts getting hectic, you may just want to drop an observer or a sentry. If you're ever against Invis heroes, preemptively drop one. If you're not against Invis, then maybe the observer on a cliff if you happen to be nearby. As the Crystal Maiden here, I'd say right here is also an acceptable spot. Just because it's going to give you vision of the area, and this is getting a pretty deep involved fight. We're getting a lot of heroes involved, so that vision to win the fight can be pretty good. Depends on your observers, and again, we have several observers still alive. We have 2 in our backpack, so if we commit one to winning a team fight, or if we lose, oh well, we tried to give our best to win that fight, I think that's okay. But turns out we win this fight even without any of those observers. So now we are deep in the enemy territory. We are free to move wherever we want. We know we're very safe. Crystal Maiden is going to first put a sentry, but she should check this cliff. She should use Q to check this cliff, because what if the enemies had observers and sentries on here? That means they were watching you do this. They're dead. They've got nothing else to do. They saw you put the sentry down, and now you're going to put the observer. And now you might see, oh, they have an observer here. That's kind of, oh, they just saw me do that, right? That's why if you have the ability to check the high ground, like Crystal Maiden, you definitely want to do so, confirm it's empty, and then put your observer. However, I wouldn't want to put this observer on this cliff unless we're going to defend it, like we saw in that Shadow Demon clip earlier in this video. If you are ready to stay in this area, then we can put this kind of ward. If not, the enemy team is going to come through here. After they all respawn, your team has now backed off because everyone's pretty low, right? The tower's back here. We got to get the lanes back here. We can't really play in this area. So when they come up, they're going to deward this. So I'd rather put it somewhere on the edge over here, on the edge over here, back here. Those are less likely to get spotted. But keep in mind, Crystal Maiden also chose to block this camp. So once the enemy realizes that, they're very likely to put a sentry in this area, maybe on the left or the right, but usually top or bottom of this ancient box is better. And that means I don't really want to put anything around this box at all, because the enemy is going to come put a sentry and they're going to accidentally find observers in this area. So actually, I might go put the observer over here on this ledge, where any sentries in this area are unlikely to catch this. Or maybe I'll opt to put it further on this left side. I just hope they won't check this cliff, but they're definitely going to check this area, so at least putting it over here closer to this cliff would be safer. In terms of getting your first deep ward down, one of the best opportunities is when your team takes a tower like this. If the enemy's not up here defending, it means they've probably given up on the area. Maybe you've killed them like we saw in the very first clip. But when they're not defending, maybe you see them, maybe you don't on the minimap, but they're probably not up here. So you can come as the Crystal Maiden, or the Hoodwink if she has an observer, that's fine too. You can just walk up here without a smoke, place a deep ward. Maybe you run into the carry, then you just don't place it, no big deal. Or if you have a smoke, sometimes this is a nice time to smoke, and you either look for a carry that you think you saw retreat this way, or you make your way this way, you find someone, or maybe you then finish mid, right? There's a couple different opportunities, and during that smoke, and while you have multiple heroes, you then place a deep ward. Crystal Maiden actually went ahead and placed this one earlier. That's totally fine. It's going to spot that Ricky, which means after this tower, you could then head over to that Ricky. He should maybe suspect something, seeing as, the tower just fell. You guys are going to look for something to do, and Axe actually walked through here, so that's going to give some information to Ricky to play it safe. So even without smoking, here's your opportunity we just talked about. You just walk in here, right? Because you know the enemy team is somewhere else on the map. You know you have this Axe who's having a pretty good game. You got the Hoodwink with you. You feel confident to walk in here and place your deep ward. Do you need to de-ward? Probably not, because that tower just fell. And it's unlikely. In the same way the Radiant, they still have their tower. This tower's up. You notice they don't really have any jungle wards yet. It's because the map changes as towers fall, and people will then shift the way they ward. Because this tower just fell, it's unlikely the enemy supports have preemptively put something here. Depending on your bracket, people may have. So you can always keep that up for what you think. But if you know where the enemy support has recently been, hey, they've never been up here lately. When would they have done this? They would have had to know we were going to take the tower in a minute and then have already put this down. If I was a gambler, man, I wouldn't gamble on pubs to do that. So I would not check this cliff like the Crystal Maiden. If you're worried about invis heroes, you can do this kind of thing, put your sentries near the observers so that you know when a Ricky, a Clinks, a Nyx has walked through that area. That's fine. If you're not dealing with that and you're just looking for the D wards, then I would not put this. I'd save the 50 gold, I'd save the sentry stock, because I just don't think they're going to have anything here. And when they do want to come play something, they're going to probably put sentries first, which means they're going to kill yours and then put their own. Here, Ricky came back to farm. You guys have been sitting in this area for quite a while. Partly bad play on Ricky. He should be suspicious until he sees you all again. But if he did see you in this area, let's say Crystal Maiden had not just gone for this check, or maybe they have an observer somewhere over here, he should not still be doing this, right? He should know, what the heck, there's an Axe here, there's a Crystal Maiden, a Hoodwink, why would I be here farming? So off of this kill, that tells me that there's almost no chance there's an observer anywhere else in this area. So let's say you did check this because you were suspicious, you had more sentries, you were thinking about placing this. After this kill, 100%, there's nothing in this area, and there's probably nothing over here or back here, because that would let Ricky know, oh, they retreated back, so it is safe to do that. He didn't know you guys were right here. He had no idea where you guys were. It was still a bad choice to come up here. Let me know if you find this kind of thing helpful. We can easily make more of these. I usually grab these examples from the replays as I see them, so feel free to drop by there if you want one of your own games checked out. But if you want very warding specific stuff, you want more case studies, then let me know in the comments and I'll make another one. Thank you. I'll see you in another video.